Well, I would say the first and most important point is this. We have completely left out what we just right now were discussing, the spiritual side of Europe. Europe has been always created by religious and spiritual elements, and we are no longer speaking of it at all. We should finally do the same thing like the communists who got popular because they so long talked about their own thing that all sorts of people believed it. We don't mention anymore. You see, I had, for instance, again, excuse me if I take a practical example from my own. I once read a book which was a collection of Bismarck's speeches in the Reichstag and in several major occasions. You know what impressed me most? You couldn't make more than 2 or 3 pages without the mention of God, of religion. He wasn't very religious, but he as a politician realized that without a religion nothing can exist. And then I took speeches of our own people of the party where there is a big C in the name, where they never talk about God. They never talk about religion. And consequently, they have an entire part which is one of the most important ones to lift out. You should talk more about God. You should take any opportunity to bring it back. And that is very important because then we have something, a common foundation. That is perhaps for me the most important side of the whole thing. The second side is, of course, talk languages, learn languages. You see, I'm a very old person. I'm now speaking 7 languages and a little others close to it. You know, 20 years in Parliament, it was such an advantage I had over almost everybody else that you don't even realize what it meant, because when I went to the French, I was a French, because I speak French. When I go to France, I take me one of them. And we have such tremendous possibilities here. With the multiplicity of languages is one of our greatest advantages. And that sort of monopoly of language, which today is developing, is a very poor development for all of us. And I would say, you see, I see the United States going straight towards something else, because when you take the mounting strength of Spanish in the United States, 5 states where in 20 years they will have this. When I heard President Bush at his acceptance speech for the presidency talk in Spanish besides English, that would have been unthinkable 10 years earlier or 15 years earlier. But there too, the Americans, who are not stupid at all, are beginning to realize that of having just that one language is a tremendous disadvantage. And consequently, I would say, learn as many languages as you can. Pick up as many. I would say, of course, we should go beyond the borders of Europe, because in Europe we can more or less manage with a Latin language, whether it is Spanish, which is probably the one language with a tremendous future, and a French, which unfortunately is on the way down, but I am still very much believe that we need French for one thing which is decisive, and that is for international treaties. You see, my experience during the war, where we had with many documents, most of the documents had this asinine part which said every language is equally true. It's not. you see, for instance, a juridical text has to go back to Latin. And today French is the closest relative of Latin, and consequently, when you take the diplomacy in the 19th century, it was very wise that most of their treaties were in French, because French language you can't discuss. But you know, now we had two languages, German and English, were both, especially in juridical texts, the most complicated ones and the weakest ones. You know, the difference is simply this. The Latin thinking in juridical affairs is, if we take the example of rifles or guns, when you see a beast running around, you have two possibilities. One is flying, you shoot with a gun. You hit it or you don't hit it, but it's going to be that way. But the other is one bullet. You kill it or it runs away and is quite happy about what has happened. And consequently, we have to have this sort of wide possibilities of languages. And you know, when you go, especially on many subjects, one after another, there is even a division between the utilization of languages. There are some languages which are very good for one thing and which are very bad for some other. You see, I like French very much. And I belong to the French group which tries to bring it, and I consider it a little success I have had. I had not many in my life, but I obtained that today there is a real progress, that French will be brought in, but not as an obligatory language for everything, but as a juridical language. That is to say, since it is today the closest relative of Latin for juridical texts, French is the best. But then there are other languages, and they have their capabilities. And these languages, we have to have several languages. We won't have it with one language in the world.